do you like what we do here? I would assume so if you're listening to this. We have had a good year for growth this year. We've had substantial growth on all the podcast feeds with new subscribers. We have the new YouTube channel with a bunch of new subscribers there too. But we want to carry this over into 2026 so we can continue to provide high-quality entertainment, high-quality news, high-quality reviews, and all that kind of stuff. So what we're asking for going into next year is, if you have the ability, we're not asking for a lot, you can donate. Go to ko-fi.com/MWP News and make a donation. Everything you do goes towards making sure we can do things. That way I can take days off work to go and cover things early, or, things of that nature. Go to events and talk about them early, see advanced screenings. All that stuff goes into that budget. On top of that, if you can't afford that, and I realize right now things are tough and things are rough out there. If you can't afford that, the easiest thing you can do is subscribe and rate. No matter what you use to get this podcast, you can subscribe. Just hit the follow button, hit subscribe, whatever the button is on your thing, and then rate us. Give us 5 stars. That'll help more people find us, and the more people find us, the more we can, the more we'll be able to do, and we'll be able to get more happening. You can also go to mwpnews.com and sign up for our newsletter. There we will have articles and stuff like that about what we cover on this show. And we will also be doing more gaming content on the YouTube channel. If we can get, with more subscribers on there, we can do more. And that's youtube.com/@MWPnews. And again, thank you for a great year for us. Next year will be better. One of the big issues that I had this year that preempted me from doing a lot of what I wanted to has been resolved with the issue with my car, and that issue has been resolved. So going into this next year, we should be a lot more smooth sailing, but we do need your help to get more people listening and get what we're doing here out there. So just subscribe, tell your friends, and if you have the ability to, and you have the money, and you want to, and you think we're doing a good job, and we've earned that, go to ko-fi.com/MWP News and throw us whatever you think we deserve. And thank you, and enjoy this episode. Good morning and welcome to 30-Minute Reviews. I am Adam, continuing the countdown to Doomsday. And as I think about it, I think we kind of have made it through, kind of like the worst streak of this. Because, I'll say it, the weakest stretch of the MCU. It's easy to say with the benefit of hindsight that, we're not totally through yet. I would say the weakest stretch of the MCU was probably, Thor to, the Dark World. And no, I'll say we are through it, because, no, I would say even before that. Iron Man 2, no. Incredible Hulk to the Dark World, because it's such a weird streak where there are a few high points, but Incredible Hulk is not great, Iron Man 2 is not great, Thor is okay, Captain America is good, the Avengers is okay, Iron Man 3 is not as bad as people say it is, but it's still not great. It's not as good as Iron Man. And I know last week I said I can hedge, or I can go either way on that. But I think definitively, it'd be hard to make the case that it's better than Iron Man. And then you get to Thor: The Dark World. Now I think we have 2 really good movies coming up, and then we get to Age of Ultron, which I think is back into that lull. And then we don't really have another, I wouldn't say miss, but not strongest entry until we get to Doctor Strange. But we'll get to that in quite a bit from here. And that's kind of the situation we find ourselves in here. Like, this is kind of the weakest entry of the beginning. I wouldn't say it's the worst. I think that, like, there's a conversation to be had about what the worst is. And I don't hate this movie as much as a lot of people do. I think it's an interesting idea. I think the lore around what's going on feels a little, wonky compared with what else has been established in the MCU up until this point and since. Like, what's the convergence? How does it work? All of that feels kind of weird. And I think the smartest thing they did with Thor was kind of remove him from, remove him from, Asgard. Trying to do this grand Shakespearean, brothers fighting and all of that feels a little bit, strange. It doesn't feel like it fits in with the rest of what this world is. And I'm not saying everything needs to fit cohesively into one tone. You definitely can do multiple tones in one franchise and have it work. I mean, look, this is very different from what comes after it with Captain America, which is very different from Guardians of the Galaxy, and each franchise can have its own distinct tone and feel and yada yada yada. But the thing that I have the biggest issue with in this movie, I think, is the fact that, it doesn't have anything that's really the lasting impact. Yes, it introduces, the second Infinity Stone, really the third Infinity Stone, but even in the Avengers, they keep saying that, the scepter is powered by the Tesseract, and, it's not until Age of Ultron where they're like, oh no, the scepter is a third Infinity Stone, and really it puts into question Thanos' plan where it's like, okay, well, we have one Infinity Stone. Let's give that to Loki to have him get a second. And then if Loki figures out what he has, we have to contend with him having two. It's a very weird plan if you think about it, on Thanos' part, but whatever, it is what it is. I'd be interested to see how Thanos got the Mind Stone in the first place. Where that came from. But the point I'm trying to make is, I feel like this movie is not good. And I think a lot of that comes from, Natalie Portman clearly does not want to be here. Natalie Portman has no interest in being in this movie. If I remember correctly, the lore of what happened behind the scenes, it was she was brought in and only signed on because Patty Jenkins signed on to do this movie. Then Marvel had, Marvel did Marvel things and wanted to, wanted to exert their control over the movie, and Patty Jenkins had that, creative differences buffer and departed the project, so they brought in, I forgot the name of the director who actually made this movie. And that kind of, and she only did it because Patty Jenkins was directing, and then that was taken away, so she was just kind of detached from the project. And you can see from her performance that she doesn't really want to be there. There are a few moments that are kind of, nice. I like when she goes to Asgard and she's kind of explaining the tech and all of that. That's a cute moment. I don't hate the way they kind of set up the way the Dark Elves work. I don't none of that really bothers me too much. I know some people are oh, they're an underdeveloped villain. It's yeah, and if I had $1 for every underdeveloped villain in the MCU, back in the day I used to say oh, well, you're going to DC to see the villains, you're going to Marvel to see the heroes. I don't think that's necessarily true, but at the end of the day, in the MCU movies, these are character studies of the heroes, and the villain just needs to be a antagonistic force competent enough to force the hero to deal with some internal issue. And that's kind of what this is. And that's kind of why this movie falls flat, is that Malekith is not that. Malekith does not force Thor to change or confront something about himself. Thor is fundamentally identical to who he is at the beginning of this movie and the end of this movie, which is something that's fine for something like the Avengers, or some other crossover event where he's not the lead. But fundamentally, it's like he doesn't go through anything. These solo movies are meant to be, character studies of these characters. If they're not going to actually study the character, then what's the point of making the movie? And that's kind of what the entire issue is here. And again, this is a case where you have a movie, and you very clearly can see that the studio interference, the studio whatever that was going on behind the scenes, whatever drama was happening behind the camera, oozes out onto the screen. And this is a continuous truth of filmmaking. If something's going wrong behind the scenes, you will see it. We've seen it with Solo. We've seen this so many times in recent years, especially as we have, the advent. I mean, it's not really the advent of, private equity and shareholders and all of that, but as more people put their, as more cooks enter the kitchen, and there are more more ingredients are being thrown into the pot, you're going to get this more and more. And it's this thing where it's like, well, I need to have this say, this needs to happen here, this needs to happen here, this needs to happen here, it needs to hit X, Y, and Z. It's got to be a 4-quadrant movie. We got to be able to recoup $1 billion every time we send one of these out. Like, it becomes a hassle of impossible standards. And that is fundamentally where this movie kind of is. And look, this is before we got to where we are now, where every Marvel movie is kind of expected to make $1 billion, and if it doesn't, it's considered a failure. This is well before that point, where it's like they did what they were anticipating. Like, this movie was made after the Avengers, and it was made, they knew the Avengers were going to do well, but they didn't know how well Iron Man 3 was going to do. And when this movie came out, it's kind of like, oh, well, we got to hit, certain, they weren't saying, like, the second Thor movie needs to make gangbusters money. And kind of what we are looking at here is kind of the start of this is the end of an era for Marvel Studios in that way. Because from here on out, we hit this point where it's like everything that comes out is a massive box office hit. Whether it's fantastic, like The Winter Soldier, or Guardians of the Galaxy, or Guardians of the Galaxy 2, or Thor Ragnarok, or it's okay, like Ant-Man, or Doctor Strange. We can expect this movie to go out and make more money than it ever should have had these things let out the MCU. And to be fair, part of the reason why this worked is that they eventized it. And that's kind of the thing where it's like, even this movie makes a solid amount of money because it didn't make a ton. Don't get me wrong, it didn't make a ton. And I think there was some consternation, if I remember correctly, back in 2014 or 2013 when this came out. There was some questioning whether or not we were going to get a Thor, a Thor 3, and we do eventually get it announced at KevinCon. But hey, it made enough to get greenlit in the way that, like, the Marvels made less, and I think that, like, Captain America Brave New World made slightly more. I don't think we're getting any more of those. Like, Quantumania made a good amount of money. I do not think we're getting another Ant-Man movie. And that's kind of the world that this is. That it's like, at this time, expectations are still not quite as high as what they would become. And that's kind of the thing that they need to grapple with here, is that we're looking at the beginning of we can do anything and make a good amount of money. Like, the real start of that is Captain America, I think, and Captain America and Guardians as the 1-2 punch in 2014. Right? Yeah, because Guardians is the last release before what's it called? Guardians was the last release before Age of Ultron, and that was in May of 2015. Like, that is the point where Captain America, the character that was no one's favorite coming out of the Avengers, and I don't think there are very many people who really love Joe Johnston's take. I mean, I loved it, and I think it ages very well. I would say it ages probably the best of the Phase 1 movies. But it was no one's favorite coming out of it. And that's kind of this weird situation that they found themselves in, where it's now Captain America can be trusted to pull, what was it, $700 million? Who'd have thought that was going to happen? Look, Guardians of the Galaxy, a fucking weird concept, pulls $800 million. And the anomaly in phase, in phase 2 becomes Thor: The Dark World, because even Ant-Man, I think Ant-Man had a relatively low budget for what it is. I want to say it was 80 million or 100 million, but that movie ends up pulling $600-700 million, or 670 million, 650 million. I don't know off the top of my head, but it pulled in excess of $600 million, and it's you mean the movie with the superhero played by Paul fucking Rudd, with a lead from Lost and the guy from season 1 of Kate from Lost, that was her name, and the guy from season 1 of House of Cards as the bad guy. That movie managed to make $600 million, and it's an Ant-Man movie. It's such a bizarre thing. It's such a and then from then on you get kind of string of hits. Whether, regardless of quality, you can count on these movies to go out and make $1 billion. And then the company ends up feeling more comfortable putting that much money into these consistently, which leads to the issue where it's why aren't we continuing to see these returns? And what it is, the other reason that Thor: The Dark World becomes this turning point is because we had the tease of Thanos in the post-credit of the Avengers. It's this thing where it's to court them would be to court death. That moment where it's we are articulating a franchise villain. We are building towards Thanos coming out and doing his thing. And it's a different actor. It's the guy who played Goldface on The Flash who's playing him. What's his name? Sidney? Damien? He's playing he's playing Thanos, and he doesn't have a line, I don't think. It's just that person that ends up getting murdered in Guardians of the Galaxy comes over and says to court them is to court death, and he has that smile. And this is the first time we're getting this introduction. It's the articulation of the term Infinity Stones, and it's this idea we're seeding throughout this this thing. And I think more than anything else, that's what the multiverse saga missed. And that's really the thing that held the multiverse saga back from the money that it could have made. And I'm not saying it's entirely Marvel's fault. I have a feeling that once we get past this, and once we get past Secret Wars next year, we're going to be in a much safer space. Marvel Studios is going to be in a much more comfortable position, because I feel like now they had time to actually plan. We've talked about it at length on this show. When they first set out to do this, they did not have all the rights that they do now. They did not have the rights to, They did not have the rights to, the X-Men or the Fantastic Four or Kang the Conqueror. These are all things that they got in the aftermath of Endgame. That deal with Fox closed after that, which is why in 2019 at San Diego Comic-Con, we don't get that big, that big thing that shows off stuff. We get the Blade announcement, we get Thor: Love and Thunder, we get WandaVision, we get, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we get all that stuff. But we don't get anything mutant related. We don't get anything Fantastic Four related. Why? Because they didn't have the rights concretely yet, because the acquisition with Fox had not gone through. And what ends up happening is now they have to show value to the Disney shareholders through the Fox acquisition. That becomes the guiding principle of the MCU throughout the multiverse saga, which leads to this very disjointed thing where it's Black Widow, the Eternals, and it's just look, I like the Eternals, I know I'm in the minority on that, Shang-Chi. None of these things are building towards anything. Like, and then there's this idea, like, oh, well, the 10 rings and the gauntlet that Miss Marvel has look kind of similar, and Miss Marvel is now a mutant. And it's one of those things where, like, as we watch this slowly unfold, and if you go through and look, you can kind of see the point where they start to get rights to certain characters. And it's like Loki very clearly is setting up what this next saga is going to be. Where when under the original thing where it was going to be Kang the Conqueror, and you get that culmination with Kang as He Who Remains at the end of time. And it's that great moment, and it's like it is a top 10 moment in the MCU, but because they changed course, and I think that, like, yeah, they're saving face now, saying we were going to change from Jonathan Majors before his domestic abuse issue happened, or that domestic abuse conviction happened. It's just one of those things where it's like, what do we, what they did was make the best of a really strange situation. And that is, you're beholden to these corporate masters who, you signed the, like, it's kind of the Faustian bargain in a way for Marvel Studios, who, Marvel originally was distributed by Paramount, and, Paramount is what it is now, but when they were originally distributed by Paramount in the early days, what you end up with is these strange, Paramount didn't really interfere, they were just a distributor, Marvel Studios did their own thing. Then you end up at Disney, and then we're still in the early phases of this. We haven't hit the schism yet where Feige ends up reporting not to Ike Perlmutter but to Bob Iger directly as a studio head, in the same way Kathleen Kennedy would, in the same way that now CEO of Disney Josh D'Amaro would as the head of the Parks division. Like, it's kind of a seminal moment for Marvel when that happens. Excuse me. The issue with that is, you've made that deal with the devil. And now they're going to expect you, when they go through and make this giant acquisition of Fox, hey, you got to show there's value in this acquisition. So make with the X-Men stuff, and make with the Kang, and make with all of that. Because, like, I want to know, and I've said this a million times, I want to know what the plan was for the MCU had Disney not bought Fox. Because that was never on the horizon or anything like that. What was the plan for phases 4, 5, and 6 without that? That's what I want to know. And it's a shame that we probably will never find that out. Or, we won't in the near term. Which is why, like, and that's the thing, is that it's like, look, let's just get through Secret Wars. We're gonna power through this. They're gonna heap in the fan service. They're gonna heap in these moments with these characters that are gonna get you to go and see this movie. It's gonna make $1 billion. It's gonna make $2 billion. Whatever it's gonna make. And this is designed to do that. Just to pull us out of this saga and get us over to the mutants. Because that's what they've been planning for. This is just like, let's limp across the finish line, let's get to the next thing, and move on with our lives. And I think that's kind of why we come back to Thor: The Dark World, and this is the turning point. This is the moment where things change for them and get us onto the path that leads us here. Yes, it puts us on this path, but it's also kind of a defining moment. And why, arguably, it might be one of the more important MCU movies. Not just because we revisit an Endgame, not just because it introduces the Reality Stone, and that becomes an integral part of this, but it's the moment where things change for Disney and for Marvel Studios. And it points to what could cause problems in the future, and ended up causing problems in the future. But we'll wrap up there for today. Our next episode will be next week. We'll be talking about Captain America: The Winter Soldier. That's the name of the movie. But until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.